Welcome to lecture 4 of module 5, which is RTOS and Integrated Development Environment of the subject ARM microcontroller and embedded systems. Subject code is 15EC or 17EC62. So in the previous lecture, we started to discuss about processes and tasks, right? So processes and tasks. So how a process will have multiple tasks, and what is the memory organization of a process, then what is a task, and we came to know how a process can have multiple tasks and what are the advantages of having multiple tasks for each process, and then we compared task with the process. So now we will start now we will discuss with multiprocessing and multitasking. So what do you mean by multi processing? So multiprocessing is the ability to execute multiple processes simultaneously. Okay, so it is the ability to execute multiple processes simultaneously. And this we saw in the previous lecture that this cannot be true, but it is pseudo parallelism. Okay, so why it is pseudo? Because, say, I'll give an example. You have to share a resource, or let's say this is the CPU. So CPU is one of the resource. So you have to share this CPU, which is single CPU, between, let's say, n number of tasks. So 3, so like that, n. So all these n tasks or processes cannot use the CPU at the same time, correct? Why that? Why? Because at any given point of time, one process or task can use the CPU, but the other task cannot use the CPU. So that is the concept. That is how it is working. Okay, unless there is one more CPU. So if there are two CPUs, what will happen? So at any given point of time, two processes can use the CPUs. Because there are two CPUs, two processes can use the CPU. But the remaining tasks, that is 3 to n, cannot use the CPUs. They will be idle. Okay, so this is the concept of multi-processing or pseudo-parallelism. So it gives us an illusion that all the processes are running or all the tasks are running simultaneously, but that is not the case. So it is always pseudo-parallelism. It will give a illusion that all the processes are running simultaneously, but that is not the case. So I'll give one more example of LEDs, two LEDs. So these are what are called as disco lights, okay, or fancy lights, wherein so one LED is on and another LED is off, and another LED turns on and this will be off. So let's say this is on, so I'll indicate that with 1, and this is off, I'll indicate that with 0. So this is on, this is off. So in the next instant, this will be off and this is on. So two LEDs. So this is the concept of disco lights. So alternatively, the lights will switch or turn on. Okay. So this is visible to us because the frequency of switching off and switching on is less or low. The frequency is low, so that is why they are visible. Okay. But if this frequency of turning on and turning off the LEDs is increased, so what will happen? So the human eye cannot distinguish whether the LEDs are on or off. Okay, so whenever you increase the frequency, will be under the illusion that both the LEDs are simultaneously on. So if you increase the frequency, okay, frequency of turning on and turning off, so then we'll assume or will be under illusion that both are on simultaneously, but that is not the case. Both will be turning on and turning off, but at a high rate or at a high frequency, but that cannot be distinguished by the human eye. So that is what will happen in multiprocessing also. So the CPU will be switched between n number of tasks or processes at a high frequency. So in terms of gigahertz, okay, or in terms of megahertz, which we cannot identify. But what we'll assume is that so all the tasks are running simultaneously, all are utilizing CPU simultaneously, but that is not the case. Only thing that will happen is the switching will be very fast. The switching of CPU from one process or task will be very fast. which will give us an illusion that all the processes are running simultaneously. So next is the systems which are capable of performing multiprocessing are known as multiprocessor systems. So the systems which are capable of multiprocessing are known as multiprocessor systems. So nowadays all systems are multiprocessing systems, and all the mobile phones are also multiprocessing systems. But you might already be familiar with it. You can run many applications. Okay, so you can switch between applications. So but that application will be still in the memory. So you can switch between applications. So the ability of OS to have multiple programs in memory for execution is referred to as multiprogramming. Okay, so multiprogramming is the ability of OS to maintain multiple programs in the memory. So multitasking refers to ability of operating system to hold multiple processes in the memory and switch. So this is here. Switch the processor, that is nothing but the CPU, from executing one process to another. So they will switch the execution between one process to another. And this switching happens at a high rate or high frequency so that we will not be able to see it. Okay. So there is three concepts here in multitasking, which is context switching, context saving, and context retrieval. So what do you mean by context switch? So I'll explain that with the simple examples. There are two tasks or processes. One is called as T1 and another is called as T2. Okay, so T1 will have some instructions, right? And T2 will also have some instructions. So that is what task will do. So if you remember the definition, it is sequential execution of instructions. That is what is task, and it is the basic unit of execution. So two tasks are there, okay, but there is only one CPU. So that means what is the meaning? Two tasks cannot run or cannot use the CPU at the same time. So one has to wait while the other uses the CPU. So let's say uh, you decide that T1 will use the CPU. Okay, you will assign the CPU to T1. So T1 starts executing. So executing in the sense whatever the instructions in T1 that will start to execute. So let's say the instructions are instruction number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these are the four instructions that are there in T1, and there are instructions in T2 also. Let's say I'll call the instructions as 5, 6, 7, and 8. So these are the instructions in T2. So T1 starts to execute, so it will start to execute. The CPU will start to execute instruction number 1 in T1, and then it will complete this and it will go to instruction 2 and it will start executing instruction 2. So let's say by the time it completes instruction 2, let's say it will consume 4 milliseconds. Okay, so by 4 milliseconds in 1 and 2 complete in T1. Then at 4 milliseconds, you decide that, yeah, so I have given T1 the chance to execute. Now I'll give the chance to T2 to execute. So what should happen now? So CPU should start to execute the instructions that are available in T2. So that is 5, 6, 7, 8. So it has to start with 5. But before starting executing the execution of 5, it has to first switch the execution from T1 to T2. So this switch in execution from one process or one task to another task is known as context switching. Okay, so from executing one task to executing another task, the switch happens. So this switch is nothing but context switching. Okay, hope you got the concept. So next is context saving. So what do you mean by context saving? Okay, so I'll again come back to the same example. So you have given the chance to T1 and it has completed its execution of instruction 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 are completed. So at 4 milliseconds, you decide that you will give the chance to T2. Fine. So now the CPU will start to execute instruction 5 because you have given the chance to T2. So before it starts to execute instruction 5, first the present context, okay, the present context of T1 has to be saved. So context means whatever the intermediate results, okay, and whichever instruction which has to be completed next. So all these intermediate values, intermediate variables, all needs to be saved. So where it will be saved? it will be saved in the RAM. It will be saved in the RAM where this process or task will be given the memory location, or it will be given some memory area. In that area, that context will be saved. Okay, so that saving of this intermediate results and saving of the next instruction, so which in this case is 3. So next instruction, it has to execute whenever it is given the chance. Further, it has to start with 3. Okay, so that everything will be saved. So this save is known as context saving. Okay, context saving. So just remember, so just it is like you are reading a book. Okay, so someone calls you, you have to attend that call. So before attending that call, what you do is you will mark the page that you were reading. Okay, so you will mark it and close the book and go and attend the call. So that is what is saving the current page that you are reading. So in this case, it is saving the context. So whenever the context switch happens, remember there will be context saving of the present task. Okay. So next we'll come to context retrieval. What do you mean by context retrieval? So again, I'll come to the same example. See, this will be a basic lecture wherein there are various concepts. So I'll go very slow because it has to be understood. Then only we'll understand the next concepts. Okay. So we'll come back. So now you're given the chance to T2 to execute. So that is CPU will start executing instruction 5. So it will start to execute instruction 5. It completes instruction 5. Then it will go to instruction 6. It will complete instruction 6. Then it will go to instruction 7. It will complete instruction 7. Remember, it is sequential execution because it is a task. So once these 3 are completed, let's say it will take 8 milliseconds to complete these 3 instructions. So after 8 milliseconds, what you do is, yes, you will decide that yeah, T2 has you have given enough time to T2. So we'll give time to T1 again. So we shall give the time to T1 once again. Okay. So then what will happen? So CPU has to start executing T1. So that means whichever the next instruction that was supposed to be executed, that should be executed now. So which is 1 and 2 were complete. So 3, it has to start execution from 3. So it will not directly go to 3. So first what will happen? Context switch will happen. So from T2 to T1 will happen first thing. Before context switch happens, what should be done? Context saving should be done. So this we discussed, right? Context saving should be done. So present values, variables, intermediate results, instructions, whatever will be saved. And where it will be saved? In the RAM or primary memory, where some memory will be allocated to this T2. Because once you allocate memory only, a task will be created. Okay. So context saving will happen first. Then what will happen? Then what will happen? Context switching. So context switching should happen. So that is from T2 you have to move to T1. So but before this happens, one more thing will happen, that is context retrieval. What do you mean by retrieval? So previously you had saved the context, right? So that is you had saved all the intermediate results, all the instructions, all the data. So they have to be restored back. They have to be restored back. So then only you can continue from wherever you are left. So I had given the example of a book. So you're reading a book, someone called you, so you mark the page and you go and attend the call. So once you come back, you cannot start reading the book directly, can you? No. So that is context switch cannot happen as it is. So first what you have to do, you have to locate the page once again. Okay, you have to locate the page once again. So once you locate the page, then you will come to know where you had left, and whatever the concept till now you had studied. Right? So whatever the concept you had studied till now, you will remember them, and then you can continue the reading of the book. Okay, so all these things should happen. First locate the page, then remember what you had learned till that particular page, then continue the book reading. Okay, so that should what will happen. So that is what is retrieval. So retrieval means, so you had saved the context, so now you have to retrieve the context or restore back the context. From where? From the RAM to this process. Then only the CPU can start its execution from instruction 3 with all the contents loaded back, because that is very necessary, because you should remember the previous concepts, previous equations, so that you will understand the next equations, next concepts while reading a book. Okay, so hope you're getting the concept. This is what is context retrieval. So these are the three things, very important. So, and remember, all these things will consume time. So context switching, context saving, context retrieval, all these three things will consume some time. So whenever you switch between multiple tasks, so there will be some time that will be lost. Why the time will be lost? Because of context switching, context saving, and context retrieval. So this time lost is known as overhead, OS overhead. Okay, because some time is required to do all this processing. So this is also known as housekeeping activities. So context switching refers to switching of execution context from task to other. So that is what I explained. So when a task or process switching happens, current context of execution should be saved. So that is what is context saving. That is what I told. Holding the page of the book to mark the page. Then after that, why you save it? Because you have to retrieve it at the later point of time when CPU executes the process. Okay. So next, during context switching, so the context of the task to be executed is retrieved from the saved list. So this is known as context retrieval. So that is what I told you. You have to remember. You have to go first. You have to locate the page where you are left off. Then before continuing, you have to remember what are the things you have already studied till that particular page, and then you can continue. So that is what is context retrieval. So that is same thing is explained in these diagrams here. So there are two processes. So this is time and this is processes, x-axis and y-axis. So process 1 is initially given the chance to execute. Okay, so it is utilizing the CPU. Until when? Until this time here. So can you see the time here? So until this particular point, it is given the chance. Fine. Then what will happen? So you decide that you will give the chance to P2, process 2 to run. So then what will happen? Context switching starts. So this time here, can you see the time here? So this time, what are the three processes that will happen? First is context saving will happen. So that is whatever the intermediate results of process 1 will be saved first. Then uh, context switching will take place. Second thing, so from process 1 to process 2, context switching will happen. Next, process 3 is context retrieval. What is this context retrieval? So if previously some result of process 2 is already saved, please bring those intermediate results so that we can continue from wherever we had left off. So that is so all these three you can say things will consume this much amount of time. Can you see this red mark here? So this much amount of time CPU is not utilized, because that much amount of time you require only to context switch. So there is context save, context switch, and context retrieval. So this is waste of time, or as I told, overhead. Then once these three things are done, so process 2 will start to execute from here to here. So this is actual time when process 2 is running. So in the meantime, process 1 is kept idle. Okay, so it is kept idle. So at this particular point of time, let's say at this time, you decide that you will give the chance once again to process 1. Okay, so then again what will happen? The three things will happen. What is this? Context saves, that is you first save the intermediate results of process 2, then context switch, so from 2 to 1. Okay, and then the last one is context retrieval. So previously process 1 was executing, so whatever the intermediate results, store them back. Okay, so that it will start its execution. Okay, so this is what will happen whenever you switch between tasks. So if you switch between tasks unnecessarily it will consume more resources, that is more time, and this is more overhead. Okay, so unnecessarily we should not switch between tasks because so much amount of time will be lost or it is a waste of time, wherein CPU will be kept idle and no useful processing will take place. So now we'll move on to what is this multiple types of multitasking. So what are the various types of multitasking? So first one is cooperative multitasking. So what is this? So is most primitive form of multitasking in which a task or process gets a chance to execute only when the currently executing task or processes relinquishes the CPU. So this is a basic concept of multitasking. Okay. So I'll give just an example. You're standing in a queue, okay, to let's say fill water in your vessels, okay, or let's say in your water bottle. You're standing in a queue. So let's say the queue contains 10 members. So and each member is in a queue. So the person who is standing at the front of the queue will get the chance to fill his bottle first. Correct? Okay, so he will start to fill the water bottle, fill his water bottle. So, but what he will do is once his water bottle is full, he will bring one more water bottle, and he will start to bring fill that water bottle. So he is filling the second water bottle, and then once that second bottle is also full, he will bring one more water bottle, which is the third water bottle, and he will start to fill. So what will happen here? So unless that person will, you can say, willingly come out of the queue so that the other person will get the chance, the second person will not get the chance unless that first person will voluntarily come out of the queue so that his bottle is full, so the others can fill the bottle. Okay, so unless that person decides that, yeah, okay, I'm done with filling my water bottles, okay, so and I can give the chance to others, the others will not get the chance. So this is what is cooperative. So you have to cooperate with others so that the others can also fill the water bottle. So but the problem here is whichever process or whichever person gets the chance to fill the water bottle, so he can fill the water bottle how much ever time he wants. Okay, how much ever time he wants, how much ever time he wants to use, he can use. So there is no, you can say, condition that he has to fill only one water bottle, two water bottles, or 10 water bottles. No, he can fill any number of water bottles. So unless he himself comes out of the queue so that others will get the chance, the others have to wait. Okay, so that is what is cooperative. So you have to cooperate with the other persons to fill the water bottle. So same case you apply the concept for a task or a process. So let's say there are 10 tasks. So you give the CPU to task 1 so that task 1 can use the CPU for any time. So it can use it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or infinite time also. It can use it for infinite time. So there is no time constraint. Right? So but the task which is using the CPU has to itself relieve the CPU. Okay, then only that CPU can be utilized by other processes or tasks. So that is what is cooperative multitasking. So in this method, any process or task can avail the CPU as much time it wants. So that is what I told. Okay, so once you give the CPU, the task can use the CPU for means any amount of time. So as I told, the person can fill his any number of water bottles. Okay, so since this type of implementation involves mercy of tasks each other for getting the CPU time, it is known as cooperative multitasking. So you have to cooperate so that the others will also get the chance to fill the water bottle, or other processes or tasks will also get their chance to use the CPU, because if you don't use the CPU, you cannot complete. Okay, you cannot, the task cannot complete, the process cannot complete. Remember this, okay? So if the currently executing task is non-cooperative, okay, so that is the person is selfish. Fine, this a person is selfish and he just goes on filling his own bottles without giving the chance to others. What will happen? The other task may not have or may have to wait for a long time to get the CPU. So they have to wait for their long time to uh, get their chance to fill the water bottles. Getting what I'm saying? So this may consume more time and long waiting time. So this is the cooperative multitasking. Next one is preemptive multitasking. So as I told guys, I'm going slow because these are basic concepts. Preemptive multitasking. So the name itself indicates. So preempt means forceful, or forcefully taking away a resource. Okay, forceful deallocation of a resource. That is what you mean by preemptive. Okay, so what it will do is it ensures that every process or task gets a chance to execute. Okay, so there is a policy here. So what is the policy? Every process or task has to get its chance to execute. It is not like one person is given the chance to fill the water bottle and he goes on filling his water bottles for infinite number of times. No, that will not work here. Okay, because it is not democracy, guys. Okay, so there has to be someone who will be looking after the whatever the amount of CPU time consumed by a task, and if that task is consuming more time, it will be removed or it will be forcefully deallocated the CPU. So that is what will happen here, preemptive multitasking. So when and how much time a process gets depends on the implementation of the algorithm. So it depends on the various type of implementations. So we shall see what are the types of implementations. So how you decide how much time you will give to which process. Okay, there is some strategy that will be involved. Right? So as the name indicates, in preemptive multitasking, the currently running task is preempted to give the chance to other process to execute. So once you give the CPU to a process, so you can also take away the CPU from that task or process. Okay, after certain amount of time. So what is the how will you allocate the time? We shall see that later. But for timing, just remember there will be someone known as the name of that person is scheduler. Okay, there will be a scheduler. He is a person who will look after that each process will get its chance to execute. Okay, how much time it will get, we shall decide that later. Okay, so this type of multitasking is based on time slots or priority. So there are time slots or priority. We shall see that later. Fine. So next, the third one is non-preemptive multitasking. So what is non-preemptive? So this is the opposite of preemptive. So what will happen here? So the processor task which is currently given the CPU is allowed to execute until it terminates. That is, terminate means until it enters the completed state. Fine, or it enters the blocked state. So when you enter a blocked state, you are waiting for some event to take place. So this is very similar to cooperative multitasking. So what will happen if you give a resource or if you give the CPU to a task or a process here, so that task or process can utilize that CPU until that task completes. Until it completes, you cannot take the CPU away from the task. You cannot forcefully deallocate the CPU from the task. So once you are given the CPU to a process task, it can utilize it for how much ever time it wants. So it is very similar to cooperative multitasking. So the cooperative and non-preemptive multitasking differ in the behavior. So there is a slight difference between cooperative and non-preemptive multitasking. So what is that? So when they are in blocked state, okay, what will happen? So this is the difference. So in cooperative multitasking, the currently executing process task need not relinquish the CPU when it enters the blocked state. So what is the meaning of this? So in cooperative multitasking, once you give the CPU to a process, it can utilize the CPU for how much ever time it wants, even when it enters the blocked state also. Even if it enters the blocked state also, it can hold the CPU. It cannot means it may not give away the CPU. or it need not give away the CPU. But in non-preemptive multitasking, what will happen is here, whereas in non-preemptive multitasking, so when the process or task enters the blocked state, it has to give away the CPU. So this is the only difference between cooperative and what is that? Cooperative and non-preemptive multitasking. So I'll give the comparison once again. So what is the meaning of this is? So again, I'll go to the example of filling the water bottle. So first I'll take the filling the water bottle example with cooperative multitasking. Okay. So one person is filling the water bottle. So he's completed filling one bottle. He'll go for the next bottle. He'll go for the next bottle like that. Let's say he's filled five bottles, and he is still not yet done with it. So now he has to uh, get the sixth bottle, but the sixth bottle is not with him, so it is somewhere else. Okay, so now he has to go and fetch that sixth water bottle. So even though he has to go and fetch the sixth water bottle, and in the meantime the others can fill the water bottle, he will not allow that. So until he goes and brings the sixth water bottle, no one will be filling the water from the tap. So it will be idle. The tap will be idle. No one is. You can say he's having a key to that tap, so he will lock the key and he will go away for 10 minutes and then bring one more water bottle and then open the lock and he will fill it. So this is what will happen in cooperative multitasking. Even though the process is blocked or the task is blocked in the sense he doesn't have the water bottle, still he will not give away the water tap, or he will not give the key to the water tap. He will lock it and he will go away and he will bring the water bottle. That is what will happen in cooperative. But the same concept, if you use non-preemptive multitasking, what will happen? So the person is filling the bottles. He has filled one, two, three, four, and five bottles. So now he wants to fill the sixth bottle, but he doesn't have the sixth bottle, and he has to go and fetch the sixth bottle. Now, in this case, he cannot lock the tap and go away. No, he has to give the lock, or he has to make way to the other person to fill the bottle with the tap. So he cannot say that I have reserved. Okay, so wait till I come back. So no, that is not the case. He has to leave the tap. He has to give the key to the other person. Okay, and he has to go and fetch the bottle. So once he fetches the bottle, he has to go back and stand in the queue so that he will get his chance once again. Okay, hope you are getting the concept. So that is what is non-preemptive multitasking. Okay. Yeah, so these are the basic concepts. So next, task scheduling. So what is scheduling? So in multitasking, there should be some mechanism in place to share the CPU among different tasks and decide which process is to be executed at a given point of time. So this is what is scheduling. Okay. So you might have seen, means there is a schedule for you people, right? So what is the schedule in college? So you go and see the timetable. So let's say for Monday, what is the schedule? So from 8 to 9, so and so class, from 9 to 10, so and so class. Then the break, then some classes again, then lab. So some batches will have lab, some batches don't. Okay, so this is what is a schedule. So there should be some schedule for the operation. So prior to the operation. So this timetable will be given to you before the semester commences. Correct? So that is what will happen here also. So there are n number of processes already in the in a queue, okay, waiting for CPU. So there is a person who will decide which process among these n processes will get the chance next to execute or to get the CPU. Fine, getting this. See, it is just like uh, you are in you go to a clinic to consult a doctor. So there in the clinic you are given some numbers. Okay, some token numbers will be given to you. Right? So let's say there are 10 tokens given, 10 patients are waiting, and the attender there calls randomly any one number. Okay, so any one number. Let's say he calls number 8. Out of 10 tokens, he will call 8. So 8 will get the chance to consult the doctor. So how he calls 8 only? How means why he called 8 only? Why didn't he call 10 or why didn't he call 1? So there is a reason for that. So the reason may be token number 8 had come early. Getting what I'm saying? Token number 8, the person, the patient, he had come early, 1 hour back itself. So that is why he will get the chance first. Fine? Or token number 8 is the friend of the doctor. So a friend means he will be given some high priority compared to others. So he will get the chance first. Getting what I'm saying? This is what is the job of a scheduler. So there should be some mechanism in place. That is the attender mechanism. In the case here is attender who will decide among various tasks or various patients that are waiting, who will get the chance to consult the doctor to decide which process gets the chance to use the CPU. Determining which process is to be executed at a given point is known as scheduling. That is what. Okay. So this is the basis of multitasking. So there will be some guidelines for determining which task is to be executed when. So as I told, what is the guidelines? So that the doctor might tell the attender. So whoever has come first, give them the chance first. Okay, irrespective of the token number. Even though his token number is 1 and he has come just now, don't give him the chance. Whoever has come first, give him the chance first. Okay, so that might be the condition. Or the doctor might say to the attender, if any persons, uh, if any of my friends come first, please give them the chance first. Okay, so like that. That is the guideline. So this guideline will be implemented in algorithm. Okay, and it will be run as a service, kernel service. So if you remember, there are kernel servers that will be run. If you remember microkernel and what is that? Monolithic kernel. So there in microkernel, some services are kept outside the what is that kernel space, right? So they will run as services. So some essential services are kept in kernel space. So in that essential service, one of the services is scheduling. So go and see that diagram that I had shown in the video. So the service or application which implements the algorithm, that is the attender, in this case is known as scheduler. So that attender is known as scheduler. So this scheduling can be preemptive, non-preemptive or cooperative. So this we discussed just now. So depending on scheduling, so the process switching will happen. So this process diagram we had seen. So the process can be ready. So the process can be in blocked state. See, from ready state it can go to running. From blocked state it can go to running. From ready state it can go to block and it can be completed. So if you see that process diagram, you will come to know how the switching can take place. Okay, so next is scheduler selection. So how will you select the attender? Okay, so how will you select the scheduler algorithm or the attender? So you have to schedule based on certain criteria. So what are those criteria? First is CPU utilization. So whatever the algorithm you have decided to use, so it should always make sure that CPU utilization is high. So CPU utilization is direct measure of how much percentage CPU is being utilized. Okay, so this CPU should always be kept used. Okay, CPU should not be kept idle, as I told. So you say that you are efficiently utilizing a resource if it is kept busy, not idle. If you keep the resource idle, that is not effective utilization. What is the use of keeping a resource idle when you can perform some operation, right? Next is throughput. So this gives an indication of number of processes executed per unit time of per unit time. So that is what is throughput. So let's say you keep the unit time as 1 second. So for for every 1 second, how many number of processes are being executed? So for let's say I'll give an example. For 1 second, the number of processes executed is 1. So it is 1 process per second. So that throughput is very less. Okay, it is just 1 process for 1 second. Okay, not used, not acceptable. So let's say it is 10 processes per second, which is good. So you are trying to process or execute 10 processes per second, which is fine, which is good. Throughput for a good scheduler should always be high. So that is what. So one process per second not acceptable. So next is turnaround time. So these are all the criteria you should consider to uh, select a scheduler or the attender. Fine. So it is the amount of time taken by a process for completing its execution. Turnaround time is the total amount of time a process takes to complete its execution. So it includes time spent by process for waiting for the main memory, time spent in the ready queue, plus time spent for completing the IO operation, and then time spent in execution. So all these come to turnaround time. It is also known as TAT, turnaround time. Okay, so what will include? Time spent for acquiring some memory, time spent in the ready queue because there are various processes waiting for filling their bottles. So in a queue, you have to wait for some time so that you will get your chance to fill your bottle. Okay. So next, time spent on completing the IO operation. So suppose there are IO operations, that is, you are waiting for some key press, you are waiting for printing some material to the printer, you are waiting for some data from the scanner. So all comes under IO operation, and it also it includes the time spent in the CPU, the time the process spends in CPU. So this TAT should be as minimum as possible because the process should not be kept waiting for more time. So that will not help in good quality of service. Okay, so just an example. Suppose you go to Reliance Mart, okay, you purchase all the things there you go that you want, and you come and end up in billing section, and you in billing section you uh, wait for half an hour, 30 minutes just to get your products billed. Okay, so what is the outcome of it? So you will be frustrated. Okay, you will be shouting at the manager of that Reliance Mart. What is this going on here? So just to get the items billed, I have to wait half an hour, which is not acceptable, right? So whoever is standing in the queue, he has to be processed at at the earliest. Okay, the person should be, or the process or the person or the task should be processed at the earliest. Then only it is acceptable. Then only you say that the QoS is good, quality of service. So waiting time. What is waiting time? So it is the amount of time spent by a process in ready queue, waiting for getting the CPU. So waiting time will only include the amount of time the process spends in the queue. Okay, so in this example, the amount of time spent by a person in the billing queue. Okay, getting what I'm saying? So next, response time is the time elapsed between submission of a process and the first response. So what do you mean by this is, let's say you go to someone's house, you go and bell. So there is a switch, you press the bell. So the pressing the bell is the submission of a process. So pressing of the switch is the bell switch is the submission of the process. So the time a person comes and opens the door and attends you, that is the time taken for the first response. Some person will come and attend you. Fine. So he will only start to attend you, but not complete. Okay. So first response means he'll come and start to attend you, but not complete. Okay. Yeah. So next, the last concept for this lecture is the various types of queues that are available that are used for scheduling. So you can see job queue is there, ready queue is there, and device queue will be there. So what are these queues? Let's see. Job queue means it contains all the processes in the system. So this is the job queue. So what it will contain? It will contain all the processes that are currently there in the system. Okay, it need not be ready processes, but it will have the information regarding all the processes in the system that are currently there. Okay, you can say it is the example you can see is, so you go to let's say uh, a KSRTC depot and you ask the manager, so how many buses are there in your depot? Right? So he will have a list. He will have a list of all the buses in the depot. Okay, so those buses can be, let's say, presently running, or they can be presently not running, they can be presently under repair, whatever. But that list will contain all the processes or all the buses in the depot. So that is what is job queue. So as I told you, have to map the embedded concepts, especially the OS concepts to real world. Then only you can remember. Ready queue. So what it will contain? Contains all the processes which are ready for execution and waiting CPU to get their turn for execution. So ready queue means only those processes which are ready to execute, but they are waiting for CPU. So they are waiting for CPU. Okay, they're waiting for CPU to get their chance, because once it will get the CPU, then only it can continue its execution or it can complete its execution. Okay, so this list is like, uh, you go and ask the KSRTC manager or the depot manager that which are the buses which are up next. Okay, so at what time is the next bus for so and so place? So only those buses which are ready to run are available here. Getting what I'm saying? Then device queue. So this contains set of processes which are waiting for IO. Okay, so what might be this then? Device queue. So if you again take the example of a bus, these are the buses which are waiting for, let's say, repair. Okay, so they are waiting for repair. So they are waiting for the some mechanic to come and attend them. So in OS point of view, these are the processes which are waiting for some IO operation to be completed or some IO event to take place, like key press. Getting what I'm saying? So these are the types of queues that will be maintained. Fine. Yeah. So now we'll talk about this preemptive scheduling or preemptive multitasking in the next lecture. Thank you.